Coming up on this episode of Nintendo Cartridge Society, we want to rank your games. It's dangerous to go alone, so the Nintendo Cartridge Society goes with you. Welcome to Nintendo Cartridge Society. My name is Patrick Ellers. I'm joined, as always, by my co-host, Mark Mitchell. Mark, how are you?
I'm doing so good.
Yeah.
Really in awe of your solid Transylvanian accent.
Oh, well, little known fact, I spent a couple years studying in Transylvania.
Oh, we know. You talk about it every opportunity.
I feel like they do things like just a little bit differently there, and like I don't want to say that like it's part of who I am now or anything.
You came back saying, "Oh, I only buy shoes that are size 45."
45, I said. Everyone said, "Patrick, be quiet." I'm talking with this outrageous accent because, of course, we are going to be ranking every game in the Castlevania Anniversary Collection.
That's right. Happy anniversary, Konami.
Oh, no. We're off to a good start here. Mark had mentioned this off mic, but the anniversary in question here is not Capcom. Is not.
I mean, it's not. It's not
Capcom's. It's not Castlevania's anniversary. It is, in fact, Capcom's anniversary.
No, it's, in fact, Konami's anniversary.
Jeez. What is happening?
I don't know.
The wheels are coming off the wagon.
I made a mistake, and then you were very gracious.
Mm-hmm.
You were like, I'm going to throw myself on this sword as well.
That's
so
right.
Mark
That's what's happening.
So out of sorts.
Well, here's the thing, is that when I was in Transylvania, we just did so much self-impaling that I just thought I would continue it here. Before we get to that business, though, some normal stuff. Some stuff that we do every week. Twice a week, you might say.
Sonic Forces borrowing program. Let's get down to brass tacks.
What do we have to do?
It's a game for Switch.
Uh-huh.
Yeah, what do we have to do to get you into this cartridge?
Or this cartridge out of my house.
Either way.
Yeah.
It's good for us either way, and it's good for you. Sonic Forces is like, look, there are times when life is tough.
Yes.
Sonic Forces is one of those times, but you do it because it makes you a better person.
And look, sometimes I will go for a run in the morning. And part of the reason I do that is that I know that anything else that happens to me during that day won't be as bad as the run I already conquered that morning.
Is terrible.
Right.
Is equal to Sonic Forces is terrible. Look, is there a man or a woman that you are interested in and you don't have anything to talk about?
Yeah, here we go.
Talk about how terrible Sonic Forces is. You won't be able to do that unless you borrow this game from Patrick.
Like, you think you might be able to because you've read something online. You've watched a YouTube video.
You've heard us talk about it.
Buster, you don't know anything about this game until you've played it.
Yeah.
And the only way to do that, as far as I know, is to borrow it from me. So you have to email us at nintendocartridgesociety@gmail.com and give us your mailing address.
Look, we're not doing you a favor. You're not doing us a favor. It's just a normal borrowing program transaction. You've done it a million times before. It's not a big deal. Something else that's not a big deal.
Totally not a big deal.
Recommending us on Twitter to earn yourself a chance to win.
Yes.
Our Detective Pikachu trading cards.
Now, between the two of us, we have 2 packs of cards, one of which has been opened.
That's right.
The other has not. You will win both sets of these cards if only you recommend our show to one other person on Twitter.
Tag us in that tweet. I mean, what do we got to do to get you in these Detective Pikachu cards?
Yeah, it's seems like it's as much as we have to do to get you my copy of Sonic Forces. It's like the same level of effort. Also, we're trying to get you 100 reviews on the Apple Podcast.
Yeah, I don't really have like a passive-aggressive way to say this.
No, well, and it was also starting to feel like actually aggressive.
Yeah.
So let's dial back the energy a bit. That's not us.
No.
We're 2 laid-back guys,
Yeah,
Mark.
we're super chill. I'm wearing socks and sandals at the same time.
I wasn't going to say anything, but like...
Because you're too chill for that.
We used to do that all the time in Transylvania. Anyway, review us on Apple Podcasts or wherever you get us. This is the only place where we are lumping it all together as like one big metric.
Mm-hmm.
But reviews everywhere help us also everywhere. So do that. Mark, are you ready to get into it? Are you ready to rank these games?
I am.
All right, let's get to it. Now, we are up to our old tricks in that we have to physically represent each one of these games somehow.
That's right. And so we, of course, have 8 amiibo
Mhm.
that are going to represent the 8 games in the Castlevania Anniversary Collection.
Now, Mark, what would you say is the biggest hurdle for us in selecting these amiibo?
There are no Castlevania ones.
We have no Castlevania amiibo. I know some exist. The Simon Belmont one, at least, is out there. I can't recall if the Richter one is already out or not.
I think so.
Either way, I have evidently decided my relationship to amiibo, and it's that I'm not buying them anymore. So we have an eclectic bunch in front of us.
That's right. Going from left to right, we have the 8-bit Mario representing the original Castlevania.
Yeah, and that's for obvious reasons. NES, 8-bit, original. It's a
It
classic.
makes sense to us.
That's right. Then first curveball is representing Castlevania 2, Simon's Quest. We're using a Link amiibo, specifically the one that represents Ocarina of Time, but only because there is no Zelda 2, The Adventure of Link amiibo, but both Castlevania 2 and Zelda 2 were like pretty big departures for the series, so that's our logic on that one.
Yeah, if you wanted a window into our minds,
You're getting
this
it.
is a pretty good one. Shovel Knight represents Castlevania 3.
As he is like a revision on a classic.
That's right. The perfected form.
Yes, that's right. Representing Super Castlevania 4 is Ganondorf. No real reason there.
Representing Castlevania Bloodlines is
So this is Mabel.
That's
from
right.
Animal Crossing.
who's once again standing in for Sonic the Hedgehog
That's
because
right.
Bloodlines was a Genesis game.
And she's a blue spiky hedgehog, so it's the logic holds together there. And then representing Kid Dracula is, of course, Bowser Jr.
Mhm.
We figure it is a young version of a villain, so that one's actually maybe the most airtight one that we have here.
Representing the Game Boy games is Kirby for Castlevania The Adventure.
That's right.
And Meta Knight representing Castlevania Belmont's Revenge.
Yeah, I believe that
second
one is
Game Boy
Castlevania 2 Belmont's Revenge, right?
Mhm. Yes.
All right, so these are the 8 games that come in this collection.
That's right. One other rule, one way that we did this is we said that we would play each game for 30 minutes.
Yes. And I...
No more, no less.
And I played some of these games for more than that.
Me too.
Okay, good. And I actually did not play any of Castlevania 2 Simon's Quest because you and I recently played it.
Yeah.
So I was like, look, if there's any of these games that I know right now, it's Simon's Quest.
Yeah, I totally agree. I didn't play it either.
So now I don't remember it at all. No, I remember it just fine. But so let's how do you want to approach this? How do you think?
Well, I think we can.
What makes most sense to you?
I'm gonna guess that we have similar games in the bottom of our ranking.
Yeah. Okay.
So my least enjoyed game is Castlevania The Adventure, the first Game Boy game represented here by Kirby.
So for me, it is also followed up immediately by Castlevania 2 Belmont's Revenge.
Oh, that's interesting. I actually liked Castlevania 2 Belmont's Revenge quite a bit more than that. It's middle of the pack for me.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah.
When I was like breaking it down in my head, I don't have a solid list. I sort of did tiers on my own of like here are
that sounds so sad.
Tiers on my own.
Mm-hmm. Great album title though.
Yes. Well, thank you. Please pick it up. You can only get it on Transylvania Records. So my tiers were like games, capital G games, like games that you would want to play now and are like real good games to play right now. And then another tier that's like historic like points of interest or curiosities, and then games that you don't really games not to be played.
See, I disagree. I disagree with the placing of Belmont's Revenge in games you don't really have to play. I thought it was a really interesting take on the Castlevania formula.
Because it has like these sort of like the stage select.
Yeah, so Belmont's Revenge is different from I think, any other Castlevania game, in that it's a little Mega Man-ish. You can choose. There's 4 castles that you begin with.
Yeah.
And they each have like a different theme, like an ice castle that's called like Crystal Castle, and then like
There's a
rock
cloud
one,
castle
and
a plant castle. Yeah.
yeah. And you can choose to do them
Basically
in any
Batman
order.
villains.
right.
Poison
exactly.
Ivy's at the end of this one. Mr. Freeze at the end of this one. I don't know a Batman Cloud villain. Kite Man.
You can choose to do them in any order.
Yeah.
And I really like that. I also just thought the mechanics were really solid. I agree it's not the best of these games, but I definitely thought I liked it better than Kid Dracula.
Oh, really?
And Castlevania 2. So my order goes Castlevania the Adventure. I have Kid Dracula written here, but I would actually maybe switch Castlevania 2 Simon's Quest and Kid Dracula. I thought Kid Dracula was an interesting idea.
Yeah.
Where like it totally has the mechanics of the regular Castlevania, like the platforming is very similar, but it's all just kind of like cute kid versions of stuff.
The platforming actually in Kid Dracula felt way better to me than any of the rest of these games as far as just as solid platforming is concerned. I think it is the best in Kid Dracula.
The jumps work in Kid Dracula how you expect them to.
That is right.
Whereas none of the jumps in Castlevania have like the momentum or physics that they should.
All the rest of them are like, you committed to that jump. And actually, I do think, or something that I found while playing them now, is that Super Castlevania 4 does a pretty good job of like mitigating that. You still can't really like reverse direction in the middle of a jump, but I think that it gives you a lot of room to like sort of correct how far you're jumping mid go, which is nice. So like I think if I were just ranking these strictly on platforming, I think I would put Super Castlevania 4 second behind Kid Dracula.
Mm-hmm.
But this is an insane way to rank these games. Kid Dracula is the game in this collection that since it came out, I have played the second most. Super Castlevania 4 for me was the one that I spent like kind of the most time with. Even though it's a game that I have played when it came out originally on the Virtual Console on Wii, and then again, when it on the SNES Classic, but I also bought it when it came to the 3DS Virtual Console. So this is the 4th time I purchased this game. All of which is to say that I spent a lot of time getting in deep in Kid Dracula, and I actually really like it a lot. The game gets weirder and cuter the deeper into it you go.
So I only made it to this is because obviously it's low on my list. I didn't like Kid Dracula that much. I thought it was interesting, but like I got to the first water level.
Yeah.
And at the end is like a guy in a bubble.
Yeah.
Like a
bubble
squid
boss,
or whatever
that
is bouncing around. But I just thought the mechanics of the water level were really weird. Maybe I was expecting Mario type swimming, but you don't. You just kind of like jump.
He's got basically Mega Man's underwater jump, where it's like he jumps too high and too slow, which does for that one level make mobility and that platforming that I praised earlier not nearly as good. The thing that I really like about Kid Dracula is that at the end of every level you get a new power that is your charged up shot does something different, or like you cycle between these like different versions of the power. And when you get like deep enough into the game, the powers get stranger. So like the first one is just like a regular charge shot. The second one is like a homing, where like 5 little bullets come out and they like zoom in on a bad guy. The third one is an explosion. One of them you turn into a bat and like fly around as a bat for a little bit. There's one that reverses the gravity for a little bit. So like it gets more interesting in the way your powers are affecting Kid Dracula's mobility throughout the levels. One of the things that I really, really liked about Kid Dracula is one of the levels is New York City. And as you're like in New York, you fight like little King Kongs, you fight UFOs that are like flying around. And then the boss is the Statue of Liberty. But the Statue of Liberty won't fight you. Like she says that she abhors violence. And it's this really cute like chibi drawing of the Statue of Liberty who's about your size. And you do like a game show. You play a game show against her. or like she's the host, and it's like you and just two rando enemies from Kid Dracula, and you answer questions
That's really fun.
about the game instead of actually fighting her, and then the level is just over.
Another thing I thought was interesting about Kid Dracula is at the end of every level. Do you remember when we were talking about Super Mario Land 2?
Yeah.
And one of the bonus stages was like you had to choose a path.
Yes.
And there were like little rats or something that like chewed the cords, and depending on which path you chose, you ended up at the end getting like one of 3 items or something like that.
Yeah, so I mean, yes, this is basically like that, where there are vertical lines that connect like 4 different starting points with 4 different endpoints, and then there are horizontal lines that connect them. But also, as soon as you pick one, it adds more horizontal lines.
I absolutely do not understand the logic of it. I just thought it was interesting that because in Super Mario Land 2, that was the first time I remembered.
Yeah.
Like encountering this mechanic, and so it was just funny that it's just a thing apparently that lots of games had.
And maybe it's a more common like Japanese thing. The other thing that's super strange about that is that this is what happens at the end of every level that kicks you into a mini game, one of 4 different mini games, and then you can like spend the coins that you collected in the thing to like play the mini games. But I don't understand any of the mini games. I don't know how any of them work.
One's like can
yeah, can where you have to guess the color of the underwear they're gonna flash at you at the end of their can dance. Weird. There's one where it's like spend coins for another turn at the wheel, and you like hold a button to spin this wheel, and I don't know what's supposed to happen, but it's just like it just is like, okay, good luck, and then you move on to the next. The mini games are all very confusing.
One is just straight up roulette.
Yeah. So it's I like this game a lot. It is definitely a like weird historical Japanese curiosity, more than it is like an actual game.
And it's kind of weird ranking it in this because it borrows, especially in the beginning, some of the mechanics of Castlevania, but it does not feel like a Castlevania game.
If you are playing this collection, play Kid Dracula up to the point that you have played the New York level, because it is the single funniest, weirdest moment in all 8 of these games. It's delightful.
So I think we've talked ourselves, or you've talked me up from Kid Dracula being second worst.
So it is no longer in your second worst slot.
I think so.
I will happily resign Castlevania The Adventure to number 8.
Yeah,
this.
I mean, it's just a bad game.
Yeah, like it's bad. It's really framey. Like stuff drops out all the time, and just like it is. All these games are hard, right?
Yeah.
But I can't really imagine being good at Castlevania The Adventure.
Yeah, or really wanting to be, because it's just punishing
Mm-hmm.
in a really unfun way. The mechanics are also just different from how regular Castlevania works. Like hearts in this game are health instead of there's no secondary item.
Oh yeah.
Anytime you get hit by an enemy, your whip like decreases in power.
Yeah,
just like
decreases all the way down. Because there's a little bit of that in Castlevania 2 Belmont's Revenge as well.
Mm-hmm.
But it doesn't knock the whip all the way down. It just loses your ability to like throw the ball at the end of it.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, and the Castlevania The Adventure also relies a lot on those eyeball enemies, those like rolling eyeballs.
Yeah.
They're everywhere.
Yeah, there's a part where you're like crossing a really long bridge.
So long.
And
This
the
bridge,
eyeballs
oh
just
my
like
God.
keep rolling.
Look, I was in San Francisco this weekend, and the longest bridge I saw was in Castlevania The Adventure.
I did like the music in Castlevania The Adventure. It was a Game Boy game, so like the loop is pretty short.
Yeah.
But I thought it was cool. Yeah, overall, just a bad game.
Yeah, I think that is probably the only one for me that I will say is a bad game.
Yes.
So I'm assuming then that next on your list, if we've argued Kid Dracula up a little bit, is going to be Castlevania 2, Simon's Quest,
right? Which
on the NES.
We did a whole episode during March, our Weird Sequels month, where we talked about Simon's Quest.
And we were pretty positive on it, right?
I don't think it's a bad game. I think it's just like really obtuse. But if you're playing it with a guide, I think it's super fun. I've had a great time playing it.
Mm-hmm.
But compared to the other games here, I don't think that it really like shines particularly.
Yeah, and I think when it gets samey, when the enemies in that start to feel the same, the game feels cheaper for whatever reason, because like it's trying to sell you on the idea of like a big open world, and when you realize that your open world is populated by like 3 different ghouls, you're like, all right, and also 100% unplayable without a guide.
Yeah.
So I'll drink to that as number 7 on our list. And then at this point, I would say Castlevania 2, Belmont's Revenge.
Yeah, so I have it a little bit higher. I have it at number 4 above the original Castlevania, which I think obviously is a good solid base for this franchise to be built on.
Yeah.
But Super Castlevania 4 and even Castlevania 3 Dracula's Curse are just way better versions of that formula.
Okay, well, so let's start to be a little bit more like nebulous here. Like, I think we can agree that the 2 that we have at the bottom make perfect sense. Let's talk about this like middle range here, which I think is going to be the Castlevania, the original Castlevania on NES, Castlevania 2, Belmont's Revenge, and Kid Dracula, right?
Mm-hmm.
Those are like our middle tier, and then the top 3 in some order are going to be Castlevania 3, Super Castlevania 4, and Castlevania Bloodlines.
Yeah.
Okay. So let's put those 3 games sort of head to head to head. Castlevania right there. So what? Tell me about your experience of playing the original Castlevania this time.
So I don't really know what there is to say about the original Castlevania other than when you're playing all of these games in a row, you see how much they all, it's not really like crib from, but they all pay homage to the original Castlevania.
The original, yeah.
Like pretty much all of these games open up exactly like
totally.
Castlevania 1.
Mm-hmm. They all open, and Super Castlevania 4 especially feels,
it's a straight up like in the like chronology, and like the lore.
Is
Super
it a
Castlevania
retelling
is
of
just like a straight up retelling?
Got it. And man, Super Castlevania 4 just does it so much better.
That's what I mean. Like, there's really nothing bad about Castlevania. It's just unrefined, compared to the later entries. And so, in my ranking, I have it here as 3rd worst, but it's not. I like all of the games that are above it. Yeah, and so I like this one. I just like the other ones more.
You know what the Castlevania on the game that we're talking about, what it does, it sort of commits the sin that the rest of them do a kind of okay job of avoiding, of the like absolutely brutal like flying Medusa head closets.
Oh man.
There are parts of the original Castlevania that are borderline unpassable just through sheer obnoxiousness of those heads. Because like they're hard to hit, and if they hit you, they are definitely knocking you off of whatever platform you're on.
One of the things that's nice about the Anniversary Collection is it has, the ability to like do save states.
Yeah.
You just like quick save. And I did that all through the original Castlevania for the Medusa heads. It's just like, I don't want to do that again.
I actually ended up doing that through most of these games. Most of these games. A lot of most of these games.
I mean, they're punishing. These games are hard, even under the best of circumstances. So yeah, I don't blame you at all.
And the game actually, it's pretty quick to like throw down a quick save state. I wish it were even faster. Like I wish it knew exactly what I was going for.
Yeah, so in order to do it, you have to like in the collection, you have to trigger the menu by pushing the left bumper, like ZL, and then it brings up a menu. The first option is like save replay.
Yeah.
Which
like I'm ever going to save a replay for what purpose?
Right. And so then you have to go down to like quick save and then say yes again, then back out of the menu twice,
right,
to get back into the game.
And it does reach a point where like you hit the bumper, you tap up 6 times or whatever, and then push the right button twice and then back out twice, and you're just like, you've got that little cycle down pat. But save file and load file are right next to each other, so there are definitely times where I want to be like, oh good, I made it past that jump, save it, oh no, I just reloaded from 4 seconds earlier. So it's not perfect, but it is it's useful and does make, I think, all of these games playable. But man, that is a point. Those points in the original Castlevania, it's almost impossible to do without.
And the reason I like Belmont's Revenge better is just because it takes that Castlevania formula. Belmont's Revenge feels very much like Castlevania. It just kind of plays with it a little bit. Like I was saying, like you can do those first 4 out of like in any order.
Mm-hmm.
I will say that the platforming and just like the level design is not as satisfying in Belmont's Revenge as it is in the original Castlevania, which feels like really solid.
Well, and part of that is just like the limitations of the Game Boy hardware. Like that is one of the reasons that I like sort of immediately put both of them at the bottom, is that the Castlevania games always look like, first of all, they always look like Castlevania games, right? But they all look so weird. There are so many like monster designs all thrown together, and they're like, yeah, whatever. They all, yeah, Frankenstein's here. I don't care. And of course, you know, Kid Dracula, you're fighting the Statue of Liberty. So like, there are just some very cool designs in all of these games. And to have like the element of color ripped out of it, and to have the Game Boy's really small screen, it feels like such a limitation on the form. I did think the Anniversary Collection's filters are interesting on the Game Boy games, because you can put it in a dot matrix style, which does like the classic Game Boy like green and gray like kind of overlay, and you can actually see every single like pixel separate. That there's like a lighter green grid that goes across everything, and actually helped me with some of the platforming, because the platforming in the first Game Boy one, is so precise that you have to be like standing on the very last pixel.
Oh, I hated that, because there's so much platforming in it.
Yes.
Like even in, I think it's like part of the first level when there's all those small little like chiclet gum looking ones that you have to jump on them.
Yes.
And there's like the ravens that are swooping down at you. Ugh, that is a bad game.
Yeah.
But we're past it.
We are past it. We've already put it at number 8 on this list. Okay, so let's go ahead and put the original Castlevania here at number 6. And then I think I would put Belmont's Revenge lower than Kid Dracula.
And I think that's fair, because Kid Dracula is I like, even though I didn't enjoy the game as much as you, I like that it breaks the formula and has such a sense of humor about itself, which I think the earlier games in the Castlevania series are very like tongue-in-cheek, and you get that a little bit less as the series goes on. Like Castlevania 4 and Bloodlines, I think, are pretty...
They're pretty gnarly
serious
games.
Yeah.
But I mean, obviously we respond well to them.
Right.
So, well done there. But yeah, Kid Dracula is just like, it's just straight up fun and goofy. And packed with like dumb little extra mini games, and like I said, a whole boss fight that's just replaced with a quiz show that's like, what was the second boss that you fought? And you're like, oh, okay, cool.
So that leaves us with our top 3.
Yep.
Super Castlevania 4, Castlevania 3, Dracula's Curse, and Castlevania Bloodlines.
But quickly before we move on to them, how did you beat all 4 levels of Belmont's Revenge?
No, I just did the first 3.
Okay. I also just did 3 of them. Because again, you can do them in any order. But I was curious if there was something that happens after that.
There is. I looked it up. There is more after those first 4.
So is it like 4 more, or is it just like Dracula's Castle?
I think it's 2 more. Maybe it's 4 more.
Okay.
I can't remember exactly.
Okay. Well, that's I believe I'll be revisiting both of those games that we just put on there at some point. Okay. So the top 3: Dracula's Curse, Castlevania 3, Super Castlevania 4, and Castlevania Bloodlines.
So the order I had them in initially, but I don't know. This could pretty much change. For me, I think Bloodlines is 3rd.
Okay.
Part of that is just the nostalgia factor. I didn't own a Genesis. This is my first time playing Bloodlines. I thought it was really cool and interesting, but it feels so Castlevania 4 is like the Castlevania of my heart.
Yeah.
And so Bloodlines just kind of feels like a version of Castlevania 4.
The Castlevania of your fart.
I mean, you said it. I do like Castlevania Bloodlines has 2 characters you can choose from that each
Mhm.
have like different weapons.
And like right from the beginning too. It's not like Castlevania 3 you have to sort of like encounter the characters.
Right, you're either playing as John Morris or Eric Lecard from the beginning. So I chose Eric. Who did you choose?
Is Eric the spear guy?
Yeah.
Yes, I also chose Eric.
And he has like a like he can jump really high because he uses a spear.
You bet he can.
I also like that these are just like characters that aren't in the series, you know?
Yeah, it's got a real like Castlevania Gaiden sort of feel to it, where it's in that world and of that world, but is just sort of like an also ran. Here's something else that happened.
I think one thing that's interesting about Bloodlines is one of the things that Castlevania 4 gets knocked for is your character sprite is so big.
Yeah.
In the game that
Bloodlines has that too, though.
Bloodlines has it, but they are more to scale. Like they're more reasonable.
Yeah.
Where they're not like the enormous, beautiful, but like takes up so much of the screen.
Yeah.
Sprites of Super Castlevania 4, but it has that like 16-bit aesthetic, and it has that Sega Genesis soundtrack, which is great in its own way. So
Yeah.
I like Bloodlines a lot. So there is a little bit of like nostalgia talking with me ranking the other two so much higher.
Yeah, Bloodlines, I think I actually liked. I probably liked it more than you did, partially because I don't have any. I don't even think I knew that Bloodlines existed before this collection was coming out. And I think it plays a little bit easier than most of the rest of these, and is very. It, like Super Castlevania, just looks more interesting to me. Like there are more interesting environments that you're encountering. You're doing things like knocking the head off of a statue so it like slides into place, and then you like traverse over it. And there's one boss that is just like a water wizard who's just slowly flooding the arena that you're in.
That whole level, I think it's like the second level
It's
of the game.
cool.
It's so cool. Even just the graphical effects. Super Castlevania 4 has a lot of like Mode 7 stuff.
It is loaded up with Mode 7.
But it doesn't look as cool as Bloodlines. Like the reflection of the water when you're like platforming and you're seeing your reflection.
Yeah.
Like that stuff is really cool.
Yeah, I think that the spectacle in Bloodlines is maybe the best in the collection here. Second, maybe only to Super Castlevania. I am really in love with how ugly the Mode 7 stuff looks. And
it's so silly.
It's so silly, but man, oh man, that room that you're in where you have to like lasso onto the thing and the room like rotates around you. I love that garbage. The chandeliers that are like huge and swinging, and they're so distorted from Mode 7 that they don't even look like chandeliers anymore.
Or when like the entire world is like spinning around you.
Oh my God.
Like you're going through a carnival house.
Yeah, what is happening there? Are you somehow like walking up a tower that is like spinning around on the outside?
It makes no sense.
But it is like just so full of like what can you do with this?
Like,
how
gee
much
whiz.
Can you push the Super Nintendo?
The soundtrack in Super Castlevania 4 is my favorite
Incredible.
of the series. It's so good. It's like rocking.
Yeah, no, it is straight rockin'. And like the fact that it starts to play with the same basic tool set as the original Castlevania, and then it's like, nah, bro, we're so much more interesting than that. And then like when you get deeper into it, and you're like, oh, I'm fighting a bat made out of gold, or like a dancing ghost couple, who like, and their haunted wedding tables or something. It is just so crazy.
Yeah.
I'm perhaps tipping my hand here, but I put Super Castlevania 4 at the top of my list.
I also put it at the top of my list, but I feel like there's a strong case for Castlevania 3 Dracula's Curse.
Okay, so this is one that I didn't play beyond my 30-minute sampling, and I will need you to represent it for me.
So this is actually really interesting because I thought you were going to really like it because it has the same basic mechanics as oh geez, what's that indie game from Indie Creates that came out recently? Bloodstained, Curse of the Moon.
Curse of the Moon.
Yeah.
Right.
So it has that same sort of thing where you are collecting characters basically to join your party, and you can swap between them.
Yes.
As the game goes on, I think like the level design is really interesting.
See, the level design for me was a little bit of a hurdle. So like, in my half hour with this game, and I know I should have played more with it. I got to Grant Dynasty, fought his like monster form, and then got control of him and was like, "Whoa, cool!" And then started backtracking through this level and was like, "What?"
Yeah, no, that is a big problem in I feel like Castlevania 3, where it kind of has the same problem as Castlevania 2,
Yeah,
where there is quite a bit of backtracking, and it's sometimes not clear where you're supposed to be going or what you're supposed to be doing.
yeah, and it feels like the backtracking in it is a punishment because like when you get Grant, you're at the top of this tower and then you have to work your way back down, and like as you're doing it, it's so obvious that the level is built for you to go from the bottom to the top, that like that's how the challenges are presented to you and like how you can find the safe paths that way. And going back down, there's a lot of like blind jumps and like, well, now I just gotta hope I'm not slightly in the air when I land on these stairs so he falls through them instead of walking down them. So I had a really tough time getting into Castlevania 3 for that reason. And I'm sure if I had like pushed on beyond this first part of like getting back through with Grant, that I would have felt better about the whole experience. But I never really got there.
Yeah, maybe it would be a good one to maybe not use the guide in the same way Castlevania 2 does, but just to direct you as to where you're supposed to go. Because as you're getting like more characters, I don't know, it's just like it feels like a really fully formed version of what the original Castlevania started. Where you're like, oh yeah, this is obviously the natural progression of things. Actually, when I was thinking about it, I was like, Castlevania 3 to me is like Indiana Jones and the Last Crusade, where they made the first one and they were like, that's awesome, let's make another one, but let's do totally different. Right?
They're like, we've got some other ideas, let's make them look like this one.
Exactly. So they made Temple of Doom and Castlevania 2. And people were like, no, that's not the Castlevania or Indiana Jones that I want. So they're like, oh, right. We'll just like do the first one again, but better.
Right. And bigger.
And that's what Castlevania 3 feels like to me personally. But I totally get what you're saying. I think it's a little bit, Castlevania 3 is like my Zelda 2, where I played it a bunch. I have such familiarity with it that I forget some of like the, or I'm willing to overlook the like more bad parts of it.
Sure. So it sounds like Super Castlevania 4 is going to be our number one on here, right?
I think so.
Yeah. So that's, I mean, I feel very good about that. Like we were saying, it is so big and bombastic and crazy, and even when it does something that's ugly, it's like ugly in the name of being
spectacle.
Being as spectacular as it possibly could be. But so what are we putting at numbers 2 and number 3? You have them lined up right now so that Dracula's Curse is at number 3, and then Bloodlines is at number 2, and Super Castlevania 4 is at number 1. Is that where you like them?
I think so.
That's where I would put them. I know that I think I liked Bloodlines more than you did, and I think you liked Castlevania 3 more.
I think it's like a comfort food type thing for me. Okay. Like I can see objectively that Bloodlines is probably like the better game. The one thing I do want to mention, just because in the past when we've talked about Castlevania, I've said that Castlevania to me is these like original iterations of it. It's my favorite version of it, and I like the cheesy kind of like monster movie aspect of it. And so I love in both 3 and Bloodlines, the opening like screen, the title screens are like a film strip.
Yes.
With like the film sockets on the side.
Yes.
Right. And so it has that very like B-movie, monster movie type feel to it. And I think that's perfect. That's what I love in Castlevania.
Man, wow. I wish they would do put out first of all, I wish they would make a new Castlevania game. But if they just like presented it as a B movie, like even with like film grain and like scratches on it, like that would be so
amazing.
Cool. All right, I think we've done it. I think so. Here's the list from the bottom to the top. Let me see if I can do it just by looking at these amiibos that are lined up in front of us. Coming in at number 8, it is Castlevania: The Adventure. At number 7, we have Castlevania 2: Simon's Quest. At number 3, we have the original Castlevania. At number 4, we have Castlevania 2 Belmont's Revenge for the Game Boy. Coming in at number 4, we've got Kid Dracula. At number 3, appropriately enough, Castlevania 3, Dracula's Curse. At number 2 is Castlevania Bloodlines. And at number 1, Super Castlevania 4 for the Super Nintendo. I think that is a definitive list, Mark.
Put it in the book.
All right, let's do it. And let's close out this segment. Oh, what did you guys think of the Castlevania collection and the games in it? How would you rank them? Were we way wrong? Is there something awesome that happens in Castlevania the Adventure?
Did you also do a foreign exchange program in Transylvania?
And if so, let's trade email addresses. I want to stay in touch with you, bro. We're going back to Transylvania in 2022. We're going to do it all together. It's going to be a great time. Mark, do you think we're ever going to get another Castlevania collection that has like the Metroidvania-esque games?
I don't think so. I think they're outside of Symphony of the Night.
Yeah.
I think they're harder to translate because they're mostly on DS and 3DS. Or I guess just DS. They didn't make any 3DS versions.
Those 2 screens.
Yeah.
There's some GBA ones.
Yeah, there are. I don't know. I mean, I would be interested if they found a way to do it for sure. I'd actually kind of be interested if they started putting out the weird like PS2 era 3D games.
Oh yeah.
That were just bonkers because they felt totally un-Castlevania like, but I think they're so weird. I don't think they're good. I just think they're interesting.
Were they PS2 or PS3?
I think they were PS2 games because PS3 was when they did what was that one called? Lords of Shadow or something.
Right. Also, give me Castlevania 64 or give me Death. That's a terrible game. You think you can be a werewolf in that?
Weren't there 2? Because they were like, the second one
was like identical to the first one, or the
just better, just like fixed.
Yeah, just like fixed. Maybe that was the PlayStation. Look, we only know about these 8 games. Okay. But if they put them out in another collection, we will find a way to rank them all. That's going to do it for this episode of Nintendo Cartridge Society. Please rate, review, subscribe on Apple Podcasts. All of that helps us out tremendously. You can share us anywhere. And remember, if you tag us, then you might win some Detective Pikachu cards. You can follow us on Twitter. I'm at Patrick_Ellers. Mark is at MKE Mitchell, and the show is at Nin Cart Society. Olivia Duncan made our logo. Our theme music is provided by 8-Bit Betty. You can get more of his music by going to 8bitbetty.com. or by listening right now. For my co-host, Mark Mitchell, this is Patrick Eller saying Transylvania for life! And thanks for listening.
Campfire.